Hi, I'm Ashley and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be reading the best YA fantasy books of 2025 so far according to Amazon. So recently I stumbled upon an article on Amazon that talked about the best YA books of 2025 so far. And I was intrigued, and I was especially intrigued by the YA fantasy books that were on the list. So the list had like all types of YA books. It had contemporaries, it had thrillers, and it had YA fantasy. But I'm specifically interested in the YA fantasy, so I want to read some of the YA fantasy that was on the list and see if they really are the best of the year so far, and to see how they compare to other YA fantasy books I've read this year that are my favorites of the year so far. So first, I just want to talk about some of the YA fantasy that were on Amazon's list. So at the top of the list was Sunrise on the Reaping, the new Hunger Games book, which I haven't read yet, but I'm not surprised that that one is at the top. And then also Our Infinite Fates by Laura Steven was on the list, which again I'm not surprised about because I haven't read that one yet, but I know like a lot of other people have, and I have seen a lot of other people post videos about it on YouTube. And then the third one was Watch Me, which is a part of the Shatter Me series, which again is not surprising because that's a super popular series, which again I haven't read, but I know it's super popular. And then there were some on the list that I have read. So The Otherwhere Post by Emily J. Taylor was on the list, and I've read that one. That one, unfortunately for me, is not a favorite of the year. I give it 3.5 stars. But also on the list is The Floating World by Axio, which I have given 5 stars, and that one actually is my favorite YA fantasy book of the year so far. And there were also a few others mentioned too that I've also given 5 stars this year, and those were Rebel Witch by Kristen Cicerelli and The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith. So I do agree with some of the books that are on this list. But there are 2 books that are not on this list that are some of my favorite YA fantasy books I've read so far this year. And those are The Notorious Virtues by Alwyn Hamilton. I loved this so much. I have a reading vlog of it up on my channel, so if you want to know more about this one, check that out. I will link that down below. And also The Scorpion and the Night Blossom. I just recently read this, loved it so much. Again, I also have a reading vlog of this one up on my channel, and I'll link it down below in case you're interested. So now the question is, what will I be reading that is on this list? So there are 2 YA fantasy books on this list that I have been interested in since even before reading this list, so I'm going to be reading those 2. And the first one is Nightweaver by R.M. Gray. I already own this one, so this is a perfect opportunity to read this one. And then the other YA fantasy is one that just came out this June, and that one is Heir of Storms by Lauren Hamilton Murray. And that one I do not own a physical copy of, but I just put a hold on it from my library, so I should be getting that in within the next week or so. So that being said, I'm going to start with Nightweaver. So this one is a book that has pirates in it. And apparently in this one, 600 years ago, Nightweavers, cursed beings with unchecked power, claimed the continents for their own. So now the only safe haven for humanity is the oceans. And so our main character, 17-year-old Aster, and her family are pirates, and they live on the ocean. But then one day, they end up engaging in a sea battle with Nightweavers on the ocean, and their lives are changed forever. And now because of the outcome of that battle, Aster and her family are thrust into a new life on land. And a handsome Nightweaver actually ends up taking them under his wing and offering them protection. So they end up going to live on his estate and doing work for him, but Aster does not trust him at all because she grew up not trusting the Nightweavers. And so our story is going to go from there. And on the inside flap, it does say that it's filled with elemental magic, forbidden romance, and breathtaking twists. And that it's perfect for fans of Powerless and a Heartless Hunter. And those comparisons are very big shoes to fill. So I'm going to go start this, and after I read some, I'll be back with my first thoughts. Esther. She was captured by enemy pirates a year ago and held like captive for 2 months, and she was rescued by this other pirate, and she stole this medallion from him, and so she wears this medallion around her neck to remind herself that he was real and that he rescued her. He said to her when he rescued her, "Now's not the time for dying love," he said. "Remember, you have to live." And that just gave me Pirates of the Caribbean vibes. And I wonder if he's going to be the one who ends up taking in Aster and her family. Because otherwise, why have that detail if he's not going to be someone important? Hi, so it's a few days later and I am here with an update on Nightweaver. I've made it to part 2 of the book, so I am 193 pages in and I'm about to start chapter 16. So I am almost halfway through this, and this book, I am having so much fun with this book so far. It pulled me in right from page 1, and ever since I started it, I have not wanted to put it down. And I am just devouring this book. And at this point, I am completely invested in the story, the characters, and the world. So this book starts off with a bang because in chapter 1, our main character, her family's pirate ship, which is named the Lightbringer, which is an awesome name for a pirate ship, is being attacked by an enemy ship. And at first she thinks they're being attacked by other pirates, but then she realizes that they're actually being attacked by Nightweavers. And so Nightweavers aren't human, and they are the whole reason that 600 years ago humans fled to the sea, because the Nightweavers took over the continents. And she's been taught that they are monsters, that they feast upon human flesh, and that they have eyes that shift between an oily black color and red. And so in the ensuing battle, Aster's oldest brother, Owen, ends up being killed. She ends up falling unconscious, and her family ends up being captured by the Nightweavers. So the Nightweavers end up taking her and her family back to land, and they plan to sell her family off. But her family ends up being bought by a young Nightweaver prince, and his name is William, or Will as his friends call him. And he ends up bringing them back to his family manor where his father, his mother, and his youngest sister live, and they end up hiring Aster and her family to work at their manor. And they are not at all what Aster imagined Nightweavers to be like, because they're actually nice to Aster and her family who are humans. And they also have other servants that seem to adore and really like Will and his family. While Aster's family seems to be adjusting well to living at the manor and on land, Aster herself is not. She's still grieving her eldest brother Owen's death. She still can't believe that they're living among the Nightweavers, who they were always taught were their enemies. And also she just really misses the ocean and being aboard a pirate ship. And Will actually offers her a chance to leave the estate and to return to the sea. But she actually ends up refusing because she doesn't want to leave her family behind. And that's the other thing about this book that I'm really enjoying, is the strong bonds between Aster and her family. And so Aster is one of 7 siblings, and she is not the youngest or the oldest. She's somewhere in between. But so far throughout this book, you've gotten to see her interact with each of her siblings and her mother and her father, and just like the close-knit relationship between all of them is so heartwarming. And I also really like how this book at the front has Aster's family tree. And I really like that it shows like the age of all the siblings too, because sometimes I forget, so I can just like look back at this. And so because she doesn't want to leave her family, especially not so soon after her brother Owen dying and her youngest sibling still trying to deal with that, she decides to stay. And she ends up learning from Will that the thing that killed her brother was actually a silk. And a silk is a type of underlin. And underlins in this book are the bad things. So Aster was always taught that the Nightweavers were the evil ones, but it's actually the underlins that are evil, and they are the ones that have like the red eyes and feast upon human flesh. So she learns from William that Owen was killed by a Nightweaver that was possessed by a silk. And that silk got away, and Aster actually saw the silk leave the body of the Nightweaver. That's the other thing. Will says that she should not be able to see them. Like, he can't see them. No one is able to see the silks. And if anyone else finds out that she can see the silks, she will be put to death. Because if you have that ability, is like part of a curse. And so that little tidbit of information is very interesting. So I'm wondering how that is going to progress and exactly what is up with that. I need to know more about that. And so then Aster decides that she is going to hunt down this Silk and avenge her brother, and Will tells her that he'll help her. And because of her ability, Aster has actually become a target of the Underlings. So the Underlings and the Nightweavers are enemies, and they are battling for control of the continents. And the Underlings recruit humans with special abilities into their armies. They will kill everyone that the person cares about and kind of drive them like to the brink of insanity in order to get them to join their cause. And Aster learns through Will that Silks are not the only type of Underlings that she needs to worry about. They're also shapeshifters, and then there are also Gores, and Gores are the ones that eat human flesh. They're very creepy because after consuming their victim, they laugh, which is just so unsettling. I'm finding the magic system like very fascinating, but also I think it could be like a little confusing just because of what the different types of magic are called. So if I'm understanding correctly, there are 4 different affinities, and each of them seem to align with the elements, but they are not called just like water or fire, air. So the different ones are fire breathers, which that one is pretty self-explanatory, but they have domain over heat and light and electricity. Then you have windwalkers, which they have dominion over air. And then you have bone wielders, which is what Will is, and I'm assuming that has to do with the earth because he's really good at making flowers grow, and also he says that he can communicate with all forms of life, so he can communicate with animals and trees and plants. But also as a bone wielder, he can control the bones in the human body, and he can also heal people too with that ability. And the last one is called a bloodletter, and they have dominion over all the waters of the earth. And so I feel like that name is a little confusing because I wouldn't naturally think that bloodletters were the ones with the water ability. Those are the 4. And then in addition to Nightweaver magic, it is mentioned that humans also had magic, but humans themselves like viewed that magic with suspicion and fear, and is now outlawed by the Nightweavers. But overall, I am really enjoying like just the learning about the lore of the world and the magic system. And one other thing I want to mention is there are mythical creatures in this book as well that are called myths. So there are pixies, and there are unicorns, and there's hippocampus, and I think the inclusion of those creatures just makes this book feel even more magical and fantastical. And in addition to the world building, the magic system, and the plot, another element that I'm finding intriguing is the romance. And so the romance is between Will and Aster, and at this point it hasn't really gone anywhere. There's just been lots of yearning, and it's also a forbidden romance because Nightweavers and humans are forbidden to have romantic relationships. In like the entirety of part 1, you had Aster and Will getting to know each other, and it's obvious like that they are developing feelings for each other, but they're also like fighting those feelings because Will knows it's forbidden, and Aster is also dealing with the fact that he is a Nightweaver and he's supposed to be her enemy, and she was always taught her entire life to hate the Nightweavers and everything they stand for. So she's kind of still trying to come to terms with that because he is like nothing like she imagined a Nightweaver to be. And also she feels kind of guilty falling in love with him because she's supposed to be finding her brother's killer and avenging him. So the romance hasn't really gone anywhere yet. Like there was a scene where they almost kissed, but then they didn't. But I'm just like loving the yearning so far. But also, I do think there might be a love triangle in this book because on the back of the book, in this little blurb here, it seems like it's a romance scene, but the love interest has blue eyes and Will has green eyes. So there's that. So yeah, those are all my thoughts so far. Sorry if they were a little chaotic. There's just so much going on in this book, and I'm really enjoying like every single thing going on in here so far. And I would say so far this definitely has the potential to be a 5-star for me. I feel like right now I'm sitting at maybe a 4.5, so it could get to a 5-star. It just really depends on like where the book goes in part 2, because it seems like we're at a turning point and we're kind of like going towards like a new arc, and maybe we might meet that second love interest. So yeah, those are all my thoughts for now. My next update will probably be my final thoughts when I finish this, because I feel like I'm just gonna devour the rest of this. I knew it. Hi, so it's now Wednesday, July 2nd, and I am back with a reading update, which is I finished Nightweaver. I finished this last night, and Amazon was right about this one. It's definitely one of the best YA fantasy books of this year so far, and I'm giving this 5 stars, and it's definitely in my top 10 YA fantasy books that I've read so far this year. In this book, it was just so bingeable. I did not want to put this down. I feel like if you're in a reading slump, this would be a good one to read because it's really fast paced and there's really never a dull moment in this book. And if I didn't have adult responsibilities, I definitely would have binged this in like a day or two. And there's never a dull moment in this book. There's just so much going on with the plot that just kept me flipping the pages. So you have the whole thing going on with Aster trying to find the Underling that killed her brother, while she's also trying to adjust to life on land among Nightweavers, who she's always thought of before as the enemy. And this book really has that feeling of like, who should you trust going on? Because everything is not as it seems. And one of the quotes that is brought up pretty often throughout this book is Aster's mother told her that kindness is the great deceiver. So that idea is brought up multiple times throughout this book, and so that just really makes you question everyone's motives and not trust anyone. And then in addition to the plot, the world building and the lore of this world and the magic system were just also fascinating. So you have the Nightweavers and the humans and the Underlings, and the whole dynamic between the 3 of them is really interesting. But also you have a 4th species, and the myths are, as their name suggests, mythical creatures like unicorns and such. There was one myth that was introduced in here that is a talking badger that wears glasses, and that just made me chuckle. And it also like made me think of Chronicles of Narnia. And so the world definitely, like, it feels dark at times, but also it definitely has a whimsical side as well. And the magic system in here is elemental based, but it's also more complex than that too, because it goes like beyond just water, fire, earth, and air. And so the magic system was also another thing that kept me reading this book. And then one last element of the story that kept me flipping the pages was the romance. So I know I mentioned in my earlier update that it looked like there was going to be a love triangle, and there is definitely going to be a love triangle because we were introduced to that second love interest. And I really like both of the love interests, and so far I would say that it could still go either way which one Aster is going to end up with, which that is a marking of a good love triangle, because I think bad love triangles are when you automatically know who the main character is going to end up with, and it just seems like that second person is just there for drama. That does not seem to be the case, at least so far with this one. So our first love interest is Will, who I mentioned earlier, and he is very much that tortured soul sort of character, and there's a lot of yearning between him and Aster, and then you have the angst and the tension between them because their romance is also forbidden because Nightweavers and humans are not allowed to be together. And he always just seems to be nice to her and wants to help her out, but also there is more to his character as well, because there are hints that he might not be as he seems. And then our second love interest is like more playful and more of a charmer, and I'm not going to say who he is because I don't want to spoil anything. And so this is a first book in a series, but this one, it doesn't end on like a giant cliffhanger. Like obviously it ends with some things being unanswered, and so I really want to pick up the second one. But the cliffhanger wasn't super painful or anything, which I appreciated. I will say, like, the thing that happened near the very end of this book with Aster, I now have so many more questions about that, and also I have a theory about something that I've kind of had a theory about throughout this book, but but that scene kind of confirmed it more for me, so I'm interested to see if I'm right about that. But the second book in this series is called Star Chaser, and it's coming out this November, so that's not too far away, so I won't have to wait too long to pick up the next one. Then I did want to mention, like, this is a pirate book. Like, Aster and her family are pirates, but only the very beginning and the very end take place at sea on a ship. So if you're looking for, like, a pirate book where the whole thing takes place at sea, this might not be for you. But that being said, like, there are moments throughout this book where Aster and her family being pirates do play a significant role, and also you see like how them being pirates has shaped them as well. Alright, so that's all my thoughts on this one. I highly recommend this if you love YA fantasy, and if you're looking for something that's a little bit different, because this did feel a lot different from like a lot of the other YA fantasy that I've read this year and have recently been reading. But anyways, that's Nightweaver, and now, next, I'm gonna read Heir of Storm. So my library hold did come in. I went to pick this up yesterday, so now it's in my possession. And so this one also has elemental magic like this one, so they're a little similar in that way. But this one features a competition where our main character will compete to see if she can win and become the ruler of their empire. And so once I start this and I've read some, I will be back to share my first thoughts on this. So it's now Friday, July 18th, and it's been a while since I updated this vlog because I took a break from this vlog to participate in Summerween. But now I'm back and I have reading update, and that is I finished all of Heir of Storms, and I was very bad and I didn't vlog this at all while I was reading it. I was going to do an update the other day, and I even like sat down in front of my camera to do so, but then I didn't feel like it, so I didn't. And then this morning I only had like 100 something pages left, so I just finished the book. And this book, I ended up loving it. So that's 2 wins so far on Amazon's best 2025 YA fantasy books of the year so far list. And I'd say up to the last 150 pages of this book was going towards a 4-star. But then those last 150 pages of this book were amazing. They were spectacular. So many things happened. There were so many revelations. There was beautiful character growth. I loved the last 150 pages of this book so much. And I pretty much loved everything about this book. I loved our characters, the world building, the magic system, and the plot. So speaking of our characters, this book follows our main character Blaze, and she lives in a world where people are born with elemental powers. And there are some people in the world that don't have powers, so not everyone has powers, and usually you only have one elemental power, unless you are the emperor of their world, and he is able to control all 4 elements, so water, fire, earth, air, plus light. And the emperor is the only person who can wield light, and everyone else either wields water, fire, earth, or air. And Blaze is born into a family of fire wielders, so it's expected that she is going to have fire powers when she is born. So when she is born, she gets the fire symbol etched onto the back of her right hand, because in this world, like, what elemental power you have is signified by a symbol that is etched onto your right hand. She is the younger of 2 twins, so minutes before she was born, her older brother Flint is born. and then she is born. And then along with her birth, though, comes this massive storm, and it floods the world, washes away homes, and thousands of people die. And that's when Blaze's mother realizes that Blaze doesn't have fire powers. She has water powers. And Blaze is not just any water wielder, she is a rain singer. So rain singers are unique in the fact that they can call the rain. Other water wielders can't do that. And before Blaze is born, the last sighting of a water singer was like half a century ago. So they're considered like almost extinct. And the storm does eventually come to the end, because when Blaze's mother finds out that Blaze is the one that causes it, she brings her out into the storm, and Blaze, as a baby, ends up stopping the storm. But the damage has already been done, and so thousands of people lost their lives, homes were destroyed, and so since that day, everyone has either feared or hated Blaze. And in order to protect her, her family has kept her isolated from the rest of the world. So the past 16 years, she has just spent among like her family, among her older brother, her younger brother, her grandmother. She's never been into the outside world. And the beginning of this book starts with Blaze turning 17. So her grandmother is throwing a birthday party for her and her brother. And like everyone is coming from the outside world, and so this is going to be like the first time that Blaze meets these people and the first time that they meet her, so it's a big deal. So she meets the different kings and queens of the different elemental wielders, because in this world you have the emperor who can use all the elements, so he is at the top of the food chain. And then you have 4 kings or queens, and each of them represents one of the elemental wielders. You have one who's the leader of the fire wielders, the air wielders, the water wielders, and the earth wielders. The title of the emperor is inherited. It's always his firstborn son who becomes the next emperor. But the heads of the elemental wielders, that is determined by battle. And so those titles are won and not inherited. And then the magic system, which is another aspect of this book that I loved, is closely intertwined with the world building. So you have the 4 elements, which you see a lot in fantasy books, that characters have elemental powers. But I like the way it was explored in this one. So for example, Blaze is a water wielder, but she's a very specific type of water wielder. She is a rain singer, which is very rare. So she can call down the rain, and regular water wielders can't do that. And then in addition to that, within water wielding, there's also different types of skills that you have to learn to master. So there is carving a wave, which is manipulating water into waves, and then there's turning water into ice, and then there's simmering, which is causing water to boil. Then there's also water whispering, where you can learn to hear the voice of water. All the different types of elements have these different subsets of skills within them that just made like learning about the magic system so fascinating. And in addition, Blaze's magic is even more interesting because she, as a rain singer, her magic is melded to her emotions. So in order for her to use her magic, she has to harness her emotions, because each of her water skills is associated with a certain type of emotion. For example, her sadness is tied to her rain powers. Then in addition to the world building and magic system, another element of this book that I really enjoyed was the characters. So Blaze is a main character. I loved her. I loved her character arc and the growth that she goes through. So in the beginning, she's very much unsure of herself and doesn't have very high self-esteem, because she grew up knowing that her birth caused a storm that caused the death of thousands. And she knows that people whisper hateful things about her, and a lot of them hate her and fear her. But slowly throughout the book, you see her kind of come to terms with that and start to respect herself and have more confidence in herself and her abilities. And the end of chapter 45 was just like a beautiful chapter in which you see how much Blaze has grown throughout the course of this book. That chapter was just so powerful, and I felt so happy for Blaze. And then in addition to Blaze, we do have 2 love interests in this book. There is a bit of a love triangle, but I think it's handled very well. I really like how it unfolded. Our love interests are the first son of the emperor, Hal, who is destined to become the next emperor. And he is very much like that good boy, tortured soul type of character. So he is nice to Blaze like from the very beginning and is interested in her, and pretty much just like disregards all the rumors about her and is willing to actually get to know her. And then our other love interest is Fox, and he is the second illegitimate son of the Emperor. And he's very much the bad boy type of character. And with him, he is kind of in a similar position to Blaze because everyone also hates and fears him because he is known as the Earth Cleaver. So he has Earth elemental magic, and when he was 13, he essentially split the world into two, and lots of people died and whole families were wiped out, so his destruction was even greater than the destruction caused by Blaze's storm when she was born. And he is arrogant, he has a devil may care attitude, it doesn't care about like what anyone else thinks of him, and he likes to mess with Blaze. And of the two, he was my favorite character because his scenes with him and Blaze were just so much fun. And you can tell, like, there's more to his character than meets the eye, and he definitely has hidden depth to his character, as you come to learn in, like, the last parts of this book. And so, along with, like, the romance and the fast-paced plot of this book, I was never bored, and I just, like, kept flipping these pages. And speaking of the plot, so there's a plot that I mentioned with the competition going on, but also there's something else going on with these weird dreams that Blaze is having as well, which I won't really go into them because I don't want to spoil anything, but just know, like, yes, there's a competition aspect in this, but there's also so much more going on in this book as well. So in addition to Blaze and the love interest, one of my other favorite characters was Renly, who is Blaze's youngest brother. And he's only 6 years old, and I just love the relationship between him and Blaze. Blaze is a sister to him, but also she's kind of like a mother to him because their mother died giving birth to Renly, so he never knew their mother. And since Blaze is, like, isolated from everyone else and is not allowed to, like, leave their manor, she and Renly were always together, and so he grew up with her being a constant presence. And so the relationship they have is just really heartwarming and precious, and I loved reading about it. So this book is the first book in a trilogy, so it does end with some unanswered questions, but I'd say, like, it's not really a big cliffhanger because things that were happening in this book are wrapped up, like the trials come to an end, and you learn who's going to be the new rulers of each element. But there is something that happens at the end of this that caught me by surprise, like I wasn't expecting that to happen. And I'm really excited to see where the story goes in the second book, so I'll definitely be picking that up when it comes out. Those are all my thoughts on Heir Storms. I 100% recommend this, especially if you love fantasy books with elemental magic systems. So with that, we're at the end of this video, and I will have to say that I agree with Amazon that these two books, Nightweaver and Heir Storms, are some of the best YA fantasy books I've read this year. So, that being said, I definitely recommend both of these, and I've been trying to decide which one I liked more, and I almost feel like my first instinct was that I enjoyed Nightweaver just a tiny bit more, but the more I think about this one, I also really appreciate it, so I'm not really sure anymore. But they're both 5-star reads for me. And if you've read either of these, let me know down below what you thought of them. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!